Hello, I'm Dr. Garrett Boyer. Welcome to Gospel Minded, where we spend a few minutes each week talking about psychology, our emotions, behavioral health, and reflect on how these important topics relate to the gospel reading for this Sunday. Now, like always, this isn't intended to be a substitute for actually going to church or counseling or therapy, spiritual direction if you are involved in those sort of practices. But like we know and like we have seen so often, things of our mind, things of our psychology go hand in hand with our spirituality so often. Now, today is a really fascinating day because it's the 11th Sunday of Ordinary Time, and it happens to be Father's Day here in this country. Now, the readings were not selected because the church recognizes Father's Day like some sort of official holiday or holy day, but these readings for today may as well have been picked because of Father's Day, because they just fit so nicely with that theme of Father's Day and the Lord's paternity and care for us as children. Now, this is one of those topics: fatherhood, masculinity, sons of the Father, daughters, children of God the Father. I could talk so much about that and go on and on and on. So I'm going to try and be concise and coherent, but this is a very exciting topic, and I want to make sure that we cover some important ground today. So the gospel comes from the 4th chapter of Mark's gospel, and this gospel that we hear today is only in Mark's gospel. Luke, John, Matthew, they don't talk about this verse, and it's only found here in Mark, and it's the parable about the seeds. So I'm going to read a little bit of it. Jesus said, "The kingdom of God is as if a man should scatter seed upon the ground, and should sleep and rise night and day, and the seed should sprout and grow. He knows not how. The earth produces of itself first the blade, then the ear, then the full grain in the ear. But when the grain is ripe, at once he puts in the sickle, because the harvest has come." And he said, "With what can we compare the kingdom of God? Or what parable shall we use for it? It is like a grain of mustard seed, which, when sown upon the ground, is the smallest of all the seeds on the earth. Yet when it is sown, it grows up and becomes the greatest of all the shrubs, and puts forth large branches, so that the birds of the air can make nests in its shade." Wow. And then that ties in just so beautifully from that first reading that we heard today from the book of Ezekiel, where God is speaking through the prophet saying, "I'm going to make a great nation rise up out of Israel." And so what a beautiful connection, and that Mark's gospel ties into that first reading. This idea of protection, God's protection. Now, when we talk about God, it's challenging because we don't exactly know what we're dealing with. God, as we know from the Old Testament, is not just one thing among many things. We can't fully comprehend God. We can't categorize him or put him in a compartment and compare God to anything else. God isn't so much the greatest of all beings, but God is being itself. Nevertheless, there are things about the natural world which can point us and give us some clues as to what God is like. And one important image which we have naturally is the gift of fatherhood, the gift of paternity. Every one of us comes from a father, and we all know what that relationship is like with our own father. And if we've had a good relationship with our dad, hopefully that's an image of what our relationship is supposed to be like with God the Father. So now, why am I bringing this up, and how does this relate to psychology? It relates to it a great deal. One of the fathers of psychology, Sigmund Freud, was so astute to the point that what happens in our early relationships, particularly with these figures of father, of mother, those relationships and the way they get played out early in life, in a lot of ways, set us up for a trajectory with relationships throughout the course of the rest of our life. And regardless of what you think about Sigmund Freud, and there are plenty of ideas that he had which are kind of puzzling, might make you wince a little bit or scratch your head, but I think he was onto something here, because you and I have experienced it throughout the course of the last 100 years. Researchers have examined this, looked into it, and it's so true. Think about your relationship with your dad as a kid. I hope that it was nurturing, that you had a lovely, beautiful relationship with your dad. And if you did, what a blessing. And that relationship is an image of what our relationship is supposed to be like with God the Father. So here in Mark's Gospel, the Lord is using this parable of the provident Lord, where there's this small seed that grows into this gigantic tree wherein every bird can make its home, can feel safe, can feel protected. Well, I'm a dad, and I think about my own life in relation to this parable from Mark's Gospel. I too have grown and developed. I didn't start as a dad. I started very, very small in life. I was born from my mother's womb, and my father raised me along with my mother. And now here I am growing, developing, much like this seed in the gospel reading for today. And now I hope that in my manhood, in my adulthood, I have become something like that tree, wherein my wife, my children have a safe place, have a home where they can feel safe, secure, loved, blessed, an image of what God the Father has done for us and with us. And I hope that that was the case for you. I hope that you had a childhood whereby you had a father who cared for you, nurtured you, nourished you, provided for your needs. Not everybody has had that. And that is true. And that's one of the things that Freud highlighted, was that there are so many ways that our fathers, that our mothers could kind of screw us up, whether intentionally or not. And I think we all have those wounds. I had a great dad. I had a beautiful childhood. And yet there are things that my parents did or did not do that still impact me to this day, just like you, just like all of us. Because this image that we are of the Father is simply that. It's an image. We are not God. We're not God for our children. We're not God even of our own lives. God is our Father, and we aspire to be holy like He is holy, to be parents the way that God is our parent, nurturing, loving, full of compassion and care to everybody that is entrusted to us, everybody who is in our family. And yet we can never live up to that ideal the way that God the Father only can. And so we strive, we work towards it. Now, if you've not had a good relationship with your father, this is the time really to turn to God the Father, who is that Father who is perfect, who doesn't fail, who doesn't let us down, who we will never be betrayed by. And so even if we've had challenging relationships with our parents, our dads, our moms, whatever, we owe them a debt of gratitude, and that we are here because of them. And I hope, like I say, that it was a good experience for you being raised and being cared for by your parents. And if it wasn't, at the very least, you have life because of them, and your life can be richly blessed because you can have a profound, beautiful, meaningful relationship with God the Father, who is that perfect archetype of what parenthood is supposed to look like. So this is maybe somewhat abstract, but I think it's so crucial and important when look around us in our society today, there's kind of a crisis of masculinity, of fatherhood, of motherhood, of femininity. These important things definitely have an impact on the way that children today are experiencing the world, and it looks different than it did even a generation ago. So just something to be conscientious of, and to be thinking about, how is this going to play out? If you are a dad, just know that you aren't going to be perfect, but do try your very best. I'm a dad, I'm not perfect, but I want to do my very best to be that God-like figure for my family, whereby they feel secure, safe, blessed, provided for. I'm not going to match up to God. I'm not gonna get to that marker, but I'm not going to stop trying. So if you are a dad, I wish you a happy Father's Day. I hope that you will be blessed by your children and that you will be a blessing to them. And I wish all of you a blessed and happy week. And I'll see you next time. I'm Dr. Garrett Boyer, and I'm gospel-minded. Take care.